There are no changes on the Ukraine-Poland border where Polish carriers block the traffic. How to unlock the border, why this happened, and what are the requirements of Polish carriers, and how Ukraine plans to deal with all this, Henry Keane will tell.
It has been a month by now since Polish carriers are blocking Ukrainian lorries at 4 Ukrainian-Polish checkpoints with Ukraine, Krakiewicz-Kochowa, Yagodin-Dorohusk, Praworuska Hryvnia, and Medyka-Szeged. During this time, 2 Ukrainian drivers died at the blocked border. Strike, the cold distress, the slow response, if any at all, of Ukrainian authorities, every day of idling due to a strike causes millions in losses. For a country at war, I remind. Poles are planning to block the roads until February 1st, 2024. What was the reason for a strike? And how is really standing behind this mayhem, and who? And of the most importance, who can affect Polish-Ukrainian relations? Let us talk about that and more later on in our talk show tonight.
Watch this.
On November 6th at 1:20 p.m. Kiev time, the protest strike of the Polish carriers began. The press service of the Volyn Customs Office reported that the work of the custom post Yagodin was completely paralyzed. Then strikers gradually blocked all the freight traffic in the direction of the checkpoints Krakiewicz-Kochowa and Praworuska Hryvnia. The protesters promised to allow passenger coaches, humanitarian aid, fuel tanks, as well as perishable goods and animals to enter Ukraine without any restrictions. However, at least 2 checkpoints, Krakiewicz-Kochowa and Praworuska Hryvnia, according to Deputy Minister of Infrastructure Serhiy Fursa, the strikers did not let humanitarian aid and fuel tanks into Ukraine. The main demands of organizers of the blockade are to draw attention to the crisis of the freight carriers market in Poland and to cancel the so-called transport visa-free regime for Ukrainian international carriers. And also, they suggest a ban on registration in Poland for transport companies with assets originating from Ukraine. The ambassador of Ukraine to Poland, Vasyl Zvarich, immediately called on carriers to stop blocking freight traffic, calling such action a painful blow to the back of Ukraine. And now let's look deeper into the context of the whole thing. In June 2022, Ukraine and the European Union signed an agreement on the so-called freight visa-free regime. Moldova joined and signed a similar document. Under the terms of it, the need for Ukrainian carriers to obtain appropriate permits for bilateral and transit transportation to EU countries was abolished, which allows them to avoid stopping the export of Ukrainian products through road checkpoints. Freight visa-free was supposed to work for a year, but the agreement was then extended until July 2024. Sic transit gloria mundi. Literally, I mean, the whole topic of transit permits for carriers has been a pain in the neck in relations with Poland for several years in a row by now. The mess took place back in 2018, where Warsaw unilaterally reduced the number of transit permits for Ukrainian lorries from 200,000 to 160,000. Polish carriers make 7% of country's GDP. Let's say clearly, Poland makes good money on shipments to Russia, but after the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation into Ukraine, Poland lost access to both the Russian and Belarusian market. That was painful. The Poles wanted to restore their position by increasing the share of transportation in Ukraine, but Ukraine has enough players on the market of its own. Moreover, the loss of access to Ukrainian drivers hurt the Poles themselves, since there are simply not enough lorry drivers in Poland. The Poles are even demanding that Ukraine must open access to the Szlach, the path, in Ukrainian registration system of freight carriers. Because of Ukrainian driver behind the wheel of a lorry with Polish license plates, once having entered Ukraine, will simply not be able to leave back. Everything was complicated enough back then. Today it's even worse. The strike is being thrown by the Polish Committee for the Protection of Carriers and Employers in the Transport Sector, freshly created this very September. Another instigator of the strike is the owner of the logistics firm Rafał Mekler and the Confederation of Freedom and Independence Party. Mekler is the head of the Lublin branch of this party. Ukraine talked with Polish protesters blocking the border, but the efforts did not lead to any consensus.
The key demand, which was the first to be voiced since the beginning of the meeting, is that protesting people want to return the permits between Ukraine and Poland for cargo transportation. When we asked why do you want these permits back, they said that they actually feel an imbalance now. That before the start of the full-scale invasion, the percentage was somewhere between 60 and 40 between Ukrainian and Polish drivers in transportation between Poland and Ukraine. Now they see that 90–95% are driven by Ukrainians and only 5–10% by Poles. And when we ask whether they're ready to go to the regions of Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Mykolaiv, those regions that are constantly under fire, which are in the eastern territory of Ukraine, the Poles of course say that they usually do not go there, but still want to drive through the territory of Ukraine.
From November 23rd, Polish farmers joined the Polish freight carriers and began to block the fourth checkpoint Medyka-Szczeginy. Agrarians are addressing their own government here rather than Ukraine. In particular, they demand to introduce corn purchase subsidies rather than increasing the agricultural tax. Still, the blockade of the border is a clear continuation of the September protest against Ukrainian grain, which was initially transported to the EU by solidarity routes after the Russian Federation blocked Ukrainian grains exports through the Black Sea. Krzysztof Bosak, a representative of the Confederation Party, visited the protesters at the border. The authorities have betrayed both transporters and farmers, he said, and blamed Brussels for the crisis on the Polish-Ukrainian border.
This protest is not politically motivated, as some in Ukraine believe. It is caused by the destruction of the economic model of operations of many Polish companies that lived at the expense of transport to the east. Regarding the sanctions policy of the EU, the policy of Russia, as well as the policy of Belarus and Ukraine, the eastern markets of Polish carriers have closed. Instead, this decision was adopted by the EU with the support of all Polish parties except the Confederation. And now there will be such tossing of hot potatoes from hand to hand. Everyone will say that this is not his responsibility. All parties were in favor of opening the EU market quickly and without any conditions or analysis. In this way, the regulatory system that stabilized economic relations between Poland and Ukraine was destroyed.
The European Commission stated that it expects the Polish authorities to resolve the situation as soon as possible. The EU reminded that Poland is, I quote, obliged to ensure the free passage of Ukrainian trucks at border crossings, end of quote. If it fails to do so, EU officials may impose fines. European Commission spokesman Adalbert Jans explained that a return to the transit permit regime is simply impossible. This would be incompatible with the agreement between the European Union and Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Federation of Employers of Ukraine and the Association of International Auto Freight Carriers of Ukraine have sent an official appeal to the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. The statement says that the blockade of the border with Poland is extremely dangerous for Ukraine's national security and economy.
According to preliminary calculations, the estimated direct losses of the Ukrainian economy from the blocking of a number of checkpoints on the Polish-Ukrainian border already amount to more than 400 million euros. If we count indirect losses, fines and penalties against Ukrainian exporters for breach of contractual obligations, a refusal to conclude contracts with Ukrainian counterparties for the new year, etc., they are obviously measured in billions of euros. The demands of the Polish strikers are defiant in nature and violate Poland's obligations under international treaties and in some cases are in direct interference in the internal affairs of Ukraine and are discriminatory.
President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, reacted to the whole situation. He hopes that it will be settled in the near future. The governments of Poland and Ukraine are working on this. Zelensky emphasized there is a plan, but it will take time. And that is exactly that both sides of a conflict just do not have.
I think we need to have a very balanced policy, have an action plan to follow, and we have this plan. The Prime Minister as well as Deputy Prime Minister Stefanishina also work at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Infrastructure. All this is there. I'm sure we can do it all. I think we should give our neighbors some time. Everything is warming up.
Things are getting worse on November 21st when Slovakians joined the Polish fellow strikers. Slovaks blocked the Vyshne Nemetsky checkpoint for an hour. This was a Slovakian gesture of support for Polish carriers. However, they said that if Brussels does not resolve the issue, they will block the border with Ukraine completely. Meanwhile, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine turned to the new Sejm and Senate of Poland with the proposal to unblock the border for carriers. It is worth emphasizing the fact that, unlike the agricultural and grain protests and previous freight carrier blockades in 2022-2023, this strike somehow does not have the support of the majority of carriers or the Polish authorities. Both large associations and trade unions, as well as the Polish Ministry of Infrastructure, no one did publicly support actually the strike or its demands. Nevertheless, without publicly supporting the demands of the protesters, Warsaw still did nothing to unblock the border. During the last days of its work, the Polish government sent a letter to the Ukrainian side with a proposal to fulfill, finally, one of the strikers' demands to cancel the mandatory registration in the e-Cherga system of the vehicle returning from Ukraine to EU. Yet Poland mentioned no guarantees of lifting the blockade, even if this demand will be satisfied by Ukrainian side. Is it just me, or does it look like someone does not really want the strike to stop that fast? Well, anyway, on November 27th, the president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, took the oath of the government of Mateusz Morawiecki. The observers in Poland are already calling this government a two-week government because Morawiecki and his ministers have 2 weeks to receive a vote of confidence from the parliament. It is already known that the new government does not have the support of the new majority of the Polish parliament. The candidate of this new majority for this post of prime minister is Donald Tusk. In such a situation, both Polish experts and Ukrainian government officials assume that the problem with the blockade will be solved only when Donald Tusk's government comes to power. Since last year, this is already the second crisis in regards to the conflict of interest of Ukrainian and Polish companies. I hope Ukrainian authorities understand. The further Ukraine advances on its path to the EU, the more similar challenges will emerge. So one of the key questions now is, can these crises be avoided after all? Let us ask the question to Serhiy Fursa, an investment banker. Maybe the banker knows. Hello. So my first question is, can this conflict, this dispute, this strike develop into something bigger, into greater crisis, as it was the case with the grain exports, for example? What do you think?
No, I don't think no. First of all, Ukrainian politician elite already have an experience of a grain crisis and do not want to escalate. Okay. Basically, I think they just want to wait till new government to be formed. Right. And to cooperate with more pro-Ukrainian or more pro-European government that will come to Poland, that will help to provide proper negotiation. On the other hand, I do not think that this strike has such big influence on Ukrainian economy as we had before with this traffic jam with agri-export. So yes, it's not pleasant for Ukrainian business. It's not good for Ukrainian economy, but we don't see any macro effect yet, and that's why I don't think so that we will see some escalation.
Okay, I hope so, but please educate us, or me at least. Is this an economic or a political issue, the strike?
No, it's a completely economic issue because it's a question of competitiveness. Right. And Polish strikers do not want to compete with Ukrainian transportation companies. Ukrainians have some advantages of new regime with new trade regime with European Union that was implemented after Russian invasion. As a result, first year 2022, everybody was focused on the war, and it was like a bad idea to do some strikes. But now people are quite tired. They see that they're losing some part of their business, and they fight for it.
Okay, but what happens to the industry in general? You know, I mean, in Ukraine and in Poland, respectively, if the blockade continues, I don't know, for another month or even 2 months, is that possible? Because there's another 2 weeks to Donald Tusk's government, and then until the issue is resolved, it could be a month. What happens? What is the
I think it will definitely will see at least 1 month of the strike. no doubts, just because all the processes in Polish government need to be done, and at least 1 month, yes. When we're talking about industries, again, I do not think we will have some major effects. It's create problems for some retailers, for instance, especially pre-New Year and pre-Christmas sellings under a question for Ukrainian retailers. On the other hand, Polish producers of milk products, for instance, also struggling because they used to have big share of Ukrainian market. And now they just can't come to Ukrainian market. And Ukrainian producers are very happy about it. So both sides are struggling, yes. But again, it's not a major macroeconomical problem. It's problem of some small businesses, small sectors, some sectors of the economies. And they will continue to struggle, no doubt. Some of them try to avoid these logistic traffic jams and start to transport through Slovakia, through Hungary, through Romania, for instance. But again, not everybody could afford it.
Well, those Ukrainian companies or Ukrainian parts, Ukrainian people that are happy about the strike are certainly not the members of the families of these two poor drivers that died on the road, waiting for the road to be opened. But are you telling me that the strike has little or even no effect at the prices in Ukraine?
I do not see any effect on the prices now in Ukraine by the strike, really.
Okay, thank you very much. But can strikers block all the checkpoints? What's going on next? I mean, what I'm trying to understand. I mean, it's been 4 or 5 crossings closed at the moment. Blocked at the moment, excuse me. What's next? What about the checkpoints? What if all of them will be blocked? What then?
Okay, the next problem could be Slovakia, where the other association of Slovakian truck drivers also want to block it. So it will become major problems, and it is now. But again, it's only problem for the guys who use road transportation. We got a lot of cargo that goes through rail, for instance, and we have no influence on that kind of transportation. We got proper relations with Romania, and now I think Romania became a biggest hub and for Ukrainian agri and for other transportation. Yes, some businesses are struggling, and as long as it takes, as much you struggle. But again, it's not a problem on a macro effect yet.
I hope it won't become one, really. But
I also.
Yeah, indeed. I'll say the Polish freight carriers, which is actually the largest lorry fleet in the European Union, they are simply unable, they're wary of competition with Ukrainian carriers. They cannot compete, unless that much is obvious. So what strikers can be hoping to really achieve, and how will it harm Ukraine, or will it harm Ukraine in any way?
Again, we will see what kind of compromise to be reached. So we don't know yet what kind of compromise will be. So we will see, would they reach something or nothing?
Or nothing.
I think we will have some compromise or some not major topics, because for Ukrainians, for instance, it's unacceptable to just forget about this European integration and forget, we have no right, let's come back to the situation that we have in 2021. No, it's unacceptable. So there's going to be some compromise on it, but I think on some small level of what they wanted.
So are you actually absolutely sure that there will be no shortage of imported goods because of the strike? So this is totally impossible? Okay, possible, but not very likely. I know it's micro, not macro. You told it, but what I'm really afraid of is that the micro usually becomes micro in 1 or 2 days, like that these days. So,
okay, currently we don't see possibilities of such shortage because again it's quite diversified. But is it possible? Yes, it's always there is possibilities that something will happen, basically because we have a war in the country, and Russia could do something additional to the strikes.
Absolutely.
Some bombing, some attack that will increase problems. Could it be? Yes.
Okay, I'll take that as an answer, thank you. But in your opinion, these protests, these strikes, is that a consequence of, let us call it a temporary anarchy in Poland? Not an anarchy, but a piece of a timeline without the government that is able and capable of decisions, of solving the problem. Is that the thing?
I think it's one of the reasons why it's so long, for instance. But to be honest, I think we're now watching demo version of European integration of future European integration of Ukraine. And we will see a lot of such strikes during next 10 years from different part of Polish and not only Polish economies. So we just have to accept it and get used to it. And do not take it very emotional, because when you was mentioned these drivers who were dead, and a lot of Ukrainians take it like a personal, very personal. What happens? Talking about it's not about economy, it's about country, it's war, and you can't do it, etc., etc., etc.
Right.
I think this emotional part exists, but again, we have to use to it. We will see a lot of other problems like that in the next 10 years.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. We have to take that emotional part out of the big politics. But part of my job is sometimes to ask questions to the people, that not to forget completely about their emotions. And these two drivers would be better if they would be still alive, of course. But the country and the politics should be put aside of it somewhat. You are absolutely right, and I agree with you. If I say, nevertheless, that Russia staged this strike and the whole mayhem about it, would you agree with me?
No, I don't think so. There is some conspiracies that back in such theory, but as for me, it's conspiracy.
Okay, how would you rate then Ukrainian authorities' reaction and actions to this strike? From 1 to 10.
8. It's nobody is perfect, but again, it's hard to explain because there is no real possibilities to affect.
I agree with you. That is right. That might be my fault. Yeah, it might be a bad question to ask, a tricky question. Okay, what advice then would you give to both negotiating sides, to Polish side and to Ukrainian side?
Well, I don't think that I have such an option, and I have a right to give an advice, because
okay, let's imagine that you do have the right. I empower you to do that. Do it. Go. Put a piece of advice.
Just forget emotions. Find some compromise, but do accept new reality. And new reality is that Ukraine going to be a member of European Union soon, and already part of European Union economy. So just accept it. Please accept it, our Polish friends, and let's go through. Let's find a way how we will build our relations in the future, next centuries, for instance, being a part of European Union.
What a super pro-Ukrainian advice. I just love it.
Sorry.
Absolutely. 140% pro-Ukrainian. Please accept it, our Polish friends. Let's move further. I mean, lovely. And I hope that will be actually the case. And all right, well, let's move to European Commission. In all this mayhem, as I called it, does the European Commission have any real power to resolve this matter in case the Polish government fails to do so, or the parties fail to find a compromise? European Commission can resolve the issue or not?
To be honest, I'm not very experienced in all this European bureaucracy. So from my point of view, I think they have nothing to do, and they can influence only by paying money or not paying money.
Right.
What we have seen previously when we were talking about agri problems, especially taking into account that there is no real government in Poland, and their influence could be only through government. And if there is no government, then they can only produce some statements, nothing more.
Thank you so very much for this lovely conversation. And the blockade of Ukrainian lorries is actually not the first crisis in the Polish-Ukrainian relations in recent times. Let us recall the grain dispute, for instance. When Poles banned Ukrainian grain to transit their country, well, back then in 2022, Ukraine managed to establish alternative routes of export and import goods. The path of Ukraine-EU solidarity and the Black Sea Grain Initiative made it possible to successfully export Ukrainian grain. which was without any exaggeration of great importance both for Ukraine and for the whole world. In 2023, Ukrainian exporters faced serious problems. Again, on July 17th, the Black Sea Grain Initiative ceased to exist as a result of Russia's unilateral withdrawal from it, so Ukraine and the EU were forced to create new export routes of Ukrainian grain. And all that when 5 EU member states, and that Bulgaria, Poland, Romania, Slovakia and Hungary, declared that Ukrainian grain causes losses to local producers. Indeed, it was the case. First, because a part of the transit grain ended by not transiting anywhere but settled down on local buyers in these countries, which is a violation of the transit conditions, of course. Secondly, the import of cheap Ukrainian grain leads to a drop in pricing and, accordingly, losses for local farmers. As so, this prompted local farmers to protest and demand a ban on the import of Ukrainian grain. In fact, that grain pain signaled the problems that Ukraine will face in the process of negotiations on EU membership in terms of agriculture in the future. Let's also not forget that the country with the largest agricultural sector, and indeed the largest country in Europe, should join the European Union. Be that as it may, in order to join the EU, Ukraine will have to take a long time to seriously coordinate with the EU legislation the issues related to the agricultural sector, namely the Minister of Agrarian Policy and Food of Ukraine, Mykola Solsky, said that 40% of the documents that needed to be agreed relate exactly to that, to agriculture. I think we need an answer from an expert in foreign policy. Alexander Krayev is the one who is with us tonight in this studio to answer the tricky questions. Let's not keep you waiting. Hello. First question. Is there a difference between a lorries blockade and a grain dispute? Well, let's go for similarities and differences. Can you give a couple of them?
Well, the similarity, one main similarity is quite simple. We do see that a big chunk of Polish businesses are still unclear of how they should handle the openness of Ukrainian market to the European market. They do remember that 20 years ago, specifically, they were in the same situation entering European market. And so they do understand that they can use this situation as an opportunity to achieve more favorable treatment, both from Ukrainian and European side. And we do see that both the lorry freighters and the farmers are using it the same way. They're trying to negotiate better terms for trans-border crossings with Ukraine and better terms with the Brussels. That's the main similarity. But if we speak about the differences, the first main difference is that the farmers' protest and basically the grain crisis on the border is mainly about money, mainly about businesses and mainly about business schemes. Whereas the crisis with the lorries is very much a political crisis, or should I say politicized crisis.
Exactly.
Because of the Confederation Party, because of the Russian money involved with the Confederation Party. And so we do see a lot of influences not very common for Polish policy, because we cannot say that Polish policy is directly influenced by Russians. But in this particular regard, unfortunately, we do understand that apart from just the economic concerns of trusty Polish businessmen, we also do see politicians making their own agenda.
All right, well then, educate me. Why the farmers joined the freight carriers in this strike? Is that the last hope for them to deliver their message, or what?
From my point of view, the farmers saw that in difference to their protest, the protest of lorries and the protest of Confederation, they have much more success. They're not so easily dealt with if we speak about the border crossings, and they do much more damage, and that is providing much more resources for their own political agenda. So basically, yeah, I do agree with you that farmers saw an opportunity to advance their goals even further, because the other part of this crisis was much more successful.
So how did the September strikes of Polish farmers end, after all? Can you remember?
Well, to a bigger extent, we saw the influence of European Commission on the Polish government, and we did see that due to European Commission's new regulations and even some, let's say it bluntly, blackmailing with the freezing of Polish funds in the European Union, they were able to achieve some kind of transparency, both in border crossings and with infrastructural infrastructural routes for Ukrainian grain, which basically should have reached the 1,000 European ports and then be delivered to Africa. And basically the influence and participation of the European Commission made it possible for Ukrainian grain to be transferred further without these gray schemes from both Ukrainian and Polish businesses. But as of now, if we speak about this particular protest, we do not see any such active involvement at this stage.
Okay, but what do you believe that any renewed vigor or any renewed protest is possible, ignited by all this current mayhem?
If we speak about Polish farmers, sure, they will try to use the current situation to their advantage. And they definitely may choose to follow this protest alone.
Right.
But we should not forget that at this time we have several court cases, both from Ukrainian commerce and commerce how should I put it? Commerce and trade associations, and both from Polish commerce and trade associations. This is a common court cases against Confederation as a political party and against these businesses, this infrastructure businesses that are blocking the border. We do see a lot of communication on national levels between the governments, between the Ministry of Infrastructure, of Economy. So yeah, they definitely, I mean farmers, may choose to take an active part in this protest. But apart from that, we do see a lot of new measures being taken, and we do see a lot of steps that are willing to demolish this protest entirely. So I do not think that the farmers' participation will be of great importance.
Poor farmers, what can I say? I mean, why did the Polish authorities not react in time for the freight carrier strike? I mean, it looks like the official Poland has taken a contemplative role, you know, just watching and does not intervene much. Could it be due to the fact
Yes, that's for sure.
Why? Why? I mean, because of the country is waiting for the government to emerge, or maybe any other reasons?
Well, that's the main reason, because the previous government of PiS, as you remember, weaponized the issue with trans-border crossing and with the grain. So basically, the PiS is not interested in dealing with this crisis because they are not in the majority, and so it's for the other guys to take care about. And the other guys, the liberal Polish parties, they are not able to create a government in time, and so basically they have no means, no instruments to influence the situation. And so that's where we are now, unfortunately.
Well, these guys or other guys, Poland was, is, and always will be a neighbor and a partner, no matter what, for Ukraine. Still, what challenges are waiting for Ukraine in regard to its Western neighbor and partner in the future?
I do believe that the economic issues will still remain the main talking for both Kiev and Warsaw, because there is still a lot of discussion to be held on our future role in the common European market, because we have the same stance, as I have already mentioned, as the Poles had in 2004. We're a big agrarian country entering the European Union, which is basically, as some European politicians joked, European Union is a big organization for protecting French farmers. And so basically, we're with our Ukrainian farmers entering this great alliance of protecting French and then Polish farmers. So there will be a lot of economic discussion, trans-border discussion. Of course, there's still something to be done with our common historic issues. Although during the last 2 years, a lot of archaeological expedition, a lot of roundtables, discussions on any level was taken concerning the Volyn tragedy, concerning all the historical details of our cooperation, still a lot of issues are being politicized and being used against us, not only by the radical Poles or radical Ukrainians, but also by Russians and by pro-Russian sentiments in both cases. And so I do believe that economy and history will be the main issues for us. And one more thing, it is very good that we are currently dealing with this situation, that we are currently working on it. Despite the crisis, despite the pandemonium that is currently unveiling on the border, it is better to deal with this issue right now, before the accession talks. Because after the accession talk begin, well, Poles will have a very big desire to blackmail us on all the issues. Well, because it's politically appropriate to do so. That's the realpolitik of the modern society. And so it is better to deal with all the issues now.
Alexander, it is lovely to hear things like that, that it is good that the crisis occurred now because now we can deal with it. I mean, this is a very wise and very politically advanced answer, I would say. So you're really an expert of foreign policy, I can see that. But let me take you higher. What if Alexander Krayev would be the minister for Ukrainian policy on agricultural policy? What would you do with this thing, with this strike?
Well, the main issue I do see right now is that both Ukrainian authorities, mainly the Ministry for Interior Affairs, and the Polish authorities are unable to control their schemers. I do not say about the legitimate lawful businesses that are suffering from the situation. Yeah. I'm talking about the big schemers, big gray companies, let's call it that way, that are buying cheap Ukrainian grain and trying to flood Polish markets with the grain that is basically frighted for African countries, for Eastern Asia countries, for all the other continents. So basically the main issue right now in this regard is to stop the illicit activities in both business systems. And that is why it is more than appropriate to involve more cooperation on the part of interior ministries and on the part of agriculture ministry. I do believe that the main issue is to speak with the businesses, to see their necessities, to see their struggle, and not to try to impose something on them, rather to listen to them and rather to abide to the demands of the market. Well, because I'm a true believer in liberal economy and the market will stabilize itself. We just need to hear the market, not hear only ourselves.
Well, as a minister, you will have definitely a lot of people that will say, we don't like you, Alexander. We don't like talking to business. We want to impose. What would you do with these? I mean, it's impossible because we are sitting right now and talking in a quite comfortable conditions. You're the future minister of Ukraine and me, the journalist. But if you will be the minister, please allow me to ask the questions on exclusive basis. If you will become a minister, just, having some certain future is good. But tell me, frankly, do you believe that the strike can grow into something bigger and more troubling for both parties?
As of now, we do see that it is coming to some kind of an apex. It's some kind of a summit of this crisis. And I do believe that all the instruments being enforced and being dealt with right now will have some effect. Because from the point of the Confederation and all the strikers, the Polish government will be ready in some time to adapt to their demands. From the point of view of Ukrainian government and Ukrainian officials and Ukrainian businesses, it is much more clear. The position of the Polish businesses and the position of the government will be clear in some time. So I do believe we will deal with this crisis in no time. However, if we are not to get rid of the strategic issues underlying the crisis, it will repeat itself again and again and again. So basically, we will deal with this current crisis, but speaking about broader economic cooperation and adding Ukraine to the general European market, we still have a lot to do. And that is a whole other question. What are the strategic narratives for our cooperation with Polish friends?
Right. You said that this crisis is economical. When you said it's political, you corrected yourself. You said it's politicized. Who politicized it more?
We do see that the Confederation, a party that were not able to properly get into any working coalition with other parties, they're trying to basically do the same thing as the Trumpist part of Republican Party is trying to do.
Exactly.
They're few, but they're very media present, they're very loud, they're very bossy, and so they're trying to achieve as much political capital, as much political influence as possible in this situation. So I do believe that's the main politicizing issue of this movement. And the second issue is that we should understand that any radical left or radical right party in Europe at some point of its history has received some funding from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs or from Russian special services. Unfortunately, we do not have any hard evidences that right now Russia is influencing Confederation, but still we do consider such possibility, and we should understand that any Confederation movements against Ukraine is highly appreciated by Russia and used by Russian propaganda, basically.
Well, of course, Russia is the enemy. I mean, and then Russia is acting as an enemy. So I'm more concerned about so-called friends of Ukraine that are ready to stab Ukraine in the back. I'm not talking about Poland. No, of course not, because Poland has economic reasons and Ukraine has economic reasons, and these two countries will definitely find the way because these are two close neighbors. I'm talking about pro-Russian activists all over the planet and the parties that are doing that. So what to do is to avoid this crisis in future. What do you think we should do? As a community,
if you speak about
not even the Poland and Ukraine, what the West and the Europe should do to avoid this crisis from emerging again and again and again?
Well, basically, if we speak about pro-Russian elements, pro-Russian speakers, they're mostly on the populist side of the political spectrum. So being it right or left politicians, they're populists. They're providing very simple solutions to very complex problems. They're speaking about, I'm sorry, but building the wall, protecting from migrants, doing everything which is very, very dumb, I'm sorry, and very simple, but still it is very appreciated by the common voter. So basically, the best means to defeat populists, especially hardliners among the populists, are economic means. We do see that first and foremost, the rich will basically almost every time defeat the television.
Right.
And in this regard, we do see that some European institutions use such methods, for example, against Hungary. Last year, when Hungary was talking about closing the border with Ukraine, not allowing any more migrants or blocking, at that time, if I'm not mistaken, it was the 7th package of sanctions from the European Union. European Union said that according to the Article 7 of European Union Agreement, well, they will block some part of funds for Hungary for their sectoral and regional development, and they will not allow Hungary to take part in any further negotiations. 2 days passed, Peter Szijjártó, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, is saying, you didn't understand us correctly. We're one of the most pro-Ukrainian parties in Europe. So basically, we need your money. So to sum it up, the main instrument, the main weapon against populism is a hardline economic policy, a hardline policy on what is right and what is wrong, even from the economic point of view.
And also, this is a great answer, very detailed and great answer. Thank you very much for your expertise. But I would love to add that maybe when someone is playing dirty, maybe you can also play the same way. This is a game for two. If they blackmail us, well, let's blackmail them. Maybe that's just how it works. At least with Hungary, it worked all right.
Yes, it worked with Hungarian many, many times, especially even pre-war periods, when Hungarians were emphasizing on the language politics, on educational laws that Ukraine were adopting and everything else. Well, Ukraine just said, and what will you do about it? And then when Hungarians were some kind of moving their armed forces near our border, we conducted a big arm training near the border with Hungary. And all this chattering about Ukrainian language laws just disappeared in several weeks. So basically, we should make our position more clear. We should strongly emphasize that it's not only, like, for example, with Hungary or with Romania language issues, with everybody else. We should emphasize that if for Europe it is only about economy and political stability, for Ukraine it is about survival. And not only the survival as a state, the survival of the population, survival of language, of culture, of everything. So Ukraine is an utterly other position than the European nation, and we have the right to be more politically, let's say, incorrect. We have the necessity to be more radical in some decisions. We have the opportunity to change the way of our history, to change the balance of powers in Europe for all the democratic forces. We are in a position to save Europe, and so that is why we are to ask for more, we are to be more radical, and we are to be less negotiable, let's say that way.
Dear Alexander, I can't wait for you to become a minister, any minister. I will be the first one. I will take Ukrainian citizenship. I will be the first one to vote for you. Thank you very much for your time and expertise. Hope to talk to you very soon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Hope to talk to you too.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Ukraine is doing everything that is possible to keep exporting grain. Recently, the second summit of the Ukrainian humanitarian initiative Grain from Ukraine was held in Kyiv. It was personally attended by the President of Latvia, Edgar Rinkēvičs, the President of Switzerland, Alan Bez, and the Prime Minister of Lithuania, Ingrid Šimonytė. Leaders of other European countries joined the summit via video link. The participants of the forum made a joint statement in which they condemned the attempts of the aggressor country, Russia, to influence the food security of the world. We all remember how Volodymyr Zelensky announced the Grain from Ukraine initiative during his speech at the G20 summit last November. The essence of the announced program is that the countries participating in the project directly purchase agricultural products from Ukrainian producers and then transfer those to countries that are on the brink of famine. The initiative was jointly organized by state structures, non-governmental organizations and private companies. And at the same time, an initiative's founding summit was held, and this year meeting President Zelensky announced what he managed to achieve during the year.
We united the countries of the world to raise funds to help everyone in the world who suffers most from food shortages. During the first year of the Grain from Ukraine initiative, we managed to accumulate $180 million at this time. About 30 participants joined the initiative. As part of the initiative, 170,000 tons of Ukrainian grain were delivered to Somalia, Kenya and Ethiopia. Our position is fundamental. We believe that no one in the world has the right to block free navigation, to turn the food shortage into weapon, to use hunger as weapon. These are elements of the policy of genocide.
Following the results, Austria sent another 3.8 million euros for the initiative of the President of Ukraine. 3 million more comes from Switzerland, 2 million each from Finland and Lithuania. Sweden sends 8 million euros for the transportation of Ukrainian grain to those countries in urgent need. The Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia are helping by opening free corridors. On June 17th, the port of Riga, Latvia accepted the first test container haul of Ukrainian agricultural products.
Russia is trying to use the situation in the Black Sea to prevent the export of Ukrainian grain and achieve the lifting of sanctions. But this will not work. We are developing alternative ways of grain export, in particular, solidarity paths, as well as new grain corridors. We will be ready to increase the transit capacity of our ports for Ukrainian exports, and this will create another opportunity, a corridor through the Baltic Sea for the export of Ukrainian products.
Yaroslav Bozhko, political scientist, is our guest tonight. Let's ask some questions. Maybe he knows. First question. Due to the failure of the grain agreement, the Russian Federation managed somewhat to partially push Ukraine out of Africa. Ukraine is looking for the ways to solve this problem, of course, but Russia is trying to, let's call it appeasement, to appease the African continent with free grain. I'm not sure that this is really free, but what Putin wants in Africa? Why Africa for us? Why it is so important for this dictator?
First of all, we should understand that Africa is a very important region where economics will grow in next 10 and 20 years. It's one of the most powerful regions of the world demographically, so it will impact also the economy. Yes, now they maybe cannot create something like in Western Europe or like in Northern America, right. But they grow very quickly. They create their own systems of education, their own systems of creating goods from their own markets. And we understand that if you would like to be in partnership with Africa in next 10 or 20 years, you should help now, right. And put in use this tool, grain, understanding that it has serious problems with food in Africa. But in general, this last decision to put some part of the grain for free in some countries of Africa is just some kind of propaganda working, yeah? Sure. Because it's very, very small count of this grain. It's not enough to maybe even one big city in Africa to give this food for people at all. But Russia gained opportunity to say, hey, Africans, we sent to Africa some free grain and so on. So you should understand that Russia is your friend, Russia is your partner, and so on.
Okay. And is it working?
In general, no, because this problem with food for Africa is much more serious than we can expect. Yes, and Russia only uses this tool to make negative effects from the war against Ukraine and from the isolation of Russia, less influential on Russian politics in Africa. But in general, Russia is still very weak on African continent too, and Russia feels that they cannot be as powerful as USA or as France in African continent, because USA, France, Great Britain, they have more than 100 years of working with African continent and so on.
Well, we know 100 years of colonization just as well. So they're always in memories, good memories and bad memories.
Yes.
But, you know, I read you, I know that Russia is giving this free grain, and it is definitely not for free. It will be cost a lot more for African people in the future, I believe. But not only grain, like several mass media wrote about the Russian footprint in the strike, you know, this Polish-Ukrainian border. How likely you think that is the case, that Russia is really standing behind the scenes, behind the curtain of the strike?
I think that Russia is totally involved in this situation, even if we cannot create a strong fact system now. But we understand, first of all, that Russia is totally, in all cases, that has such type of results that can be good for Russia if it will be realized. Also, I should say, after the blockade of the grain deal by Russia, Russia just trying to push also some Polish political and economical groups to blockade Ukraine. And it's not only about Ukrainian economy to stop this selling products to European Union. It's mostly about blocking Ukrainian way to European Union, because now we see what things, for example, say Ursula von der Leyen. We now see statements from Roberta Metsola from the European Parliament. Now I understand that European Union would like to take Ukraine into their union more quickly than we can expect before. So Russia trying to create such political and semi-political situation with different groups of interests, with different political parties, with some locals, to stop this process at all.
Sure. Well, I believe even if we cannot prove right now, together, me and you, that Russia is standing behind the strike, I think that Ukraine should consider that Russia is standing behind any single effort that is not going to be good for Ukraine. I believe that this is the thing. But tell me, educate me as a political scientist, what is next? I mean, let us try to estimate the political consequences for both sides of the border strike, for Poland and Ukraine, I mean, that's what I meant.
First of all, we should wait for creating a new government in Poland, because Donald Tusk is well known also in Poland and in EU as very pro-European politician. And we understand that in general, he will be this consensus creator at this situation, because he understands that he should be totally pro-European. This is his own political platform, his own political ties with EU institutions. And also he should create a way to speak with Polish people who can be really angry on this situation with Ukraine, on situation with Ukrainian agricultural foods on the Polish markets and so on. In general, it can take 2 or 3 weeks to create this new government, but we understand that it will be totally another politics than the Prawo i Sprawiedliwość government created in Poland. Because Prawo i Sprawiedliwość was not so pro-European. Yes, they was pro-Western in general, but they more closely to the USA, to the America as a center of power, not to the Brussels, not to the Berlin at all.
So, in general, this kind of, let's call it, sort of a slow reaction of Ukrainian authorities to all this, or at least not much of that reaction that helped the situation, could be actually a wise move to wait until Donald Tusk is really gaining the power and then deciding this question. Do you think this is the case?
We should not take any. We shouldn't create any situations that can make more risks for Ukraine. We should wait for some time and understand what will be the policy of the next Polish government to make this conflict smaller than it is now.
Well, I mean, yeah, it is easy for us to say that we should wait. We should sit in these comfortable conditions and just talk about that. But people die on the border. Yaroslav, people are dying on the border. I mean, and this is for not, and the country at war is not receiving as much as it should. It's Ukrainian grain, and Ukrainian people are dying even on the border. So I think that while the world is not really caring for all that, some politicians might resolve this matter even faster. But this is just me, you know, who cares about me? So let me ask another question. Polish politician and leader of the opposition party's civil coalition, Mr. Donald Tusk, accused Mateusz Morawiecki's government of inaction regarding the situation with, you know, blocking the border, strikes and everything with Ukraine. So what should we all expect to this issue after Tusk's government comes to power exactly? Tell me, what should we as a world and Ukraine expect when Tusk is at full power, at full speed?
First of all, we will see creating some kind of dialogue platform between Tusk government and these protesters. Because it's a very typical way to solve the problem at the first stage. To turn its problem into this long process of dialogue and deblockade maybe first border lines and the next points of the border and so on and so on. But I should say that in general, it is a political problem. It's not a problem in minds of people who are striking. Yes, it's a big political problem that show us that there are some conflicts in the Poland, and there are some forces from the Russia that can use it conflicts to unite this agenda, to unite some Russian agenda and to unite some internal Polish agenda. And we cannot criticize this Polish agenda at all, because they have their own right to, for example, to being conservatives or to being isolationists and so on. But we should create a useful way to solve the problem, and we should not politicize as it Russia do now.
Great answer and great advice. I'm not trying to criticize Poles at all. I'm just trying to understand what steps should be taken so that the situation does not repeat itself in the nearest future and similar problems do not arise. What would you do if you would have that power, a magic wand? What would you do to stop the situation from repeating itself in the future?
Stop the situation, from repeating, we can just only creating some groups in Poland that can be useful for Ukrainian-Polish relations. It may be some analytical centers that can work with Polish agenda and send us the first signals of such crisis before it starts, and maybe to send to Polish government some signals from Ukrainian government, from Ukrainian people, what is the real situation, what our real point of view on Ukrainian-Polish relations. It's first of all, but work can take 1 and 2 years and maybe 10 years. But in general, we need such strong institutions that can unite us. Because in general, our ties with Poland come closer and closer, and our dependency from Poland, we see it grows in geometrical progression from year to year. So we need to create such instruments to work with their own agenda.
Great. Well, I wish you luck, and I wish you a lot of experience, Mr. Bozhko. And I believe that you have enough experience, you're young enough to create such tools, such instruments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We talk. Bye.
Watch this.
The international organization Global Rights Compliance has collected evidence of Russian preparations to instigate famine in Ukraine, yes. Based on these new facts, Moscow, already way before February 24, 2022, was actively preparing to seize Ukrainian grain and then to do all possible to instigate and control famine in Ukraine. A new report by human rights experts says that since the first day of the Great War, the Russians have deliberately targeted areas reaching grain and food production infrastructure. The organization found proof that a Russian defense contractor began purchasing grain trucks, as well as 3 new 170-meter marine bulkers were prepared as early as December 2021, which indicates an early planning stage of the theft of Ukrainian food resources on an unprecedented scale. Human rights activists and I very much believe they in Ukraine just as well hope that the collected data will lead to the prosecution of Putin for the war crimes of famine as well as others as a method of warfare. The market value of grain stolen in Ukraine by Russia is estimated to be more than $1 billion per year. I tell you this solely so to remind who is clearly the greatest evil in the world today and against whom the world should be united. Both Ukraine and Poland have their right to protect their economic interest, of course, and while they are finding their way through misunderstandings and hardships, in the world we should not forget who benefits from disputes between two friendly countries and what they can lead to. That's it, folks. It was my show. Talk for more. My name is Henry Keen. Please find us on the internet. Like, comment, subscribe, send us a question. Your opinion matters a lot to us. Thank you so very much, and I hope to see you very soon. Goodbye.